And so I just opened the glass container for one of these necklaces and I took it out, and we just walked out of the store. Just outing myself here. I seem so irresponsible. Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the Psychopath Checklist. In the first video I spoke about what makes a psychopath, how we diagnose it, the relation to serial killers, and the supposed good psychopaths in society. So if you missed that one, be sure to check it out. Now we're going to move on to part 2, where we look deeper into the actual psychopath checklist and the 20 items that psychologists use to measure psychopathic traits in an individual, usually a prison inmate. I'm also going to take the test and answer the questions as we go. However, it's not really supposed to be self-administered, so this is just for fun really. And it's not a standalone test either. A psychologist would also conduct an interview and look extensively into a patient's background, their family, relationships, and their criminal history as part of their assessment. I found this website, which I'll link in the description, where you can take the test and it marks your score at the end. This is the original checklist. The more modern versions only contain 20 items for a possible score of 40, which is known as the PCLR, R for revised. And I'll also refer to this website from Robert Hare, which explains some of the items in a bit more depth. As you can see, the test itself doesn't contain much detail. Then we've got things like lack of remorse, lack of empathy, lack of emotional depth, which all seem fairly similar, but this website explains them a little bit more. And there's just 3 possible answers. Definitely present, possibly present, and definitely absent. So that keeps it somewhat simple to answer. I'm not a medical professional, so it's highly likely that I'll misinterpret some of these questions. So let's not take my answers too seriously. So with that said, let's take a look at this. So the first item on the test is related to glibness and superficial charm, which Robert Hare describes as psychopaths are often voluble and verbally facile. They can be amusing and entertaining conversationalists, ready with a clever comeback, and are able to tell unlikely but convincing stories that cast themselves in a good light. They can be very effective in presenting themselves well and are often very likable and charming. So, do I think I'm superficially charming? I'm tempted to put definitely absent for this one. But I wonder, it's one of those things where maybe it's the kind of thing that a lot of people could put on when you're meeting new people, put on your best face. So maybe I'll put possibly present for that one, just to get the ball rolling. Number 2, previous diagnosis as a psychopath or similar. Definitely not for that one. Number 3, egocentricity, grandiose sense of self-worth. So we'll go back to this website and we'll just see what Robert Hare describes that as. Psychopaths have a narcissistic and grossly inflated view of their own self-worth and importance, a truly astounding egocentricity and sense of entitlement, and see themselves at the center of the universe, justified in living according to their own rules. It's not that I don't follow the law, said one subject. I follow my own laws. I never violate my own rules. She then proceeded to describe these rules in terms of looking out for number 1. Psychopaths often claim to have specific goals, but show little appreciation regarding the qualifications required. They have no idea of how to achieve them and little or no chance of attaining these goals, given their track record and lack of sustained interest in formal education. A psychopathic inmate might outline vague plans to become a lawyer for the poor or a property tycoon. One inmate, not particularly literate, managed to copyright the title of a book he was planning to write about himself, already counting the fortune his best-selling book would bring. Egocentricity. Thinking of only of oneself without regard for the feelings or desires of others, self-centered. Again, this could be one of those things where anyone could have moments like that, but maybe not all the time. Because putting yourself first is not necessarily a bad thing. I was more of a people pleaser, and so I've had to learn how to not do that. Learn to put myself first. But I don't see myself as the center of the universe. But I do sort of live by my own rules. I think for that one too, I'll just put possibly present. Again, we're not taking this too seriously. So number 4, proness to boredom, low frustration tolerance. This one I can already say I would put possibly present. I feel like I do have a proness for boredom, but I also feel like I'm busy all the time, so I can't get bored. And I don't mind getting bored. Sometimes if I take holidays, when I start to feel bored, I feel that's a good thing, because then my mind starts to wander and I start thinking about what I want to do. What do I really want to do when I've got time off? But it's not something that happens all the time to me. Okay, next one. Number 5, we've got pathological lying and deception. I already think I would say no to this, but I just read this part that Robert Hare has written about deceit and manipulation. With their powers of imagination in gear and beamed on themselves, psychopaths appear amazingly unfazed by the possibility, or even by the certainty, of being found out. When caught in a lie or challenged with the truth, they seldom appear perplexed or embarrassed. They simply change their stories or attempt to rework the facts so they appear to be consistent with the lie. The result is a series of contradictory statements and a thoroughly confused listener. And psychopaths seem proud of their ability to lie. When asked if she lied easily, one woman laughed and replied, "I'm the best. I think it's because I sometimes admit to something bad about myself. They think, well, if she's admitting to that, she must be telling the truth about the rest." I like to think that I have a powerful imagination, but I already know that I'm not a pathological liar. As far as I understand pathological liars, it's like a disorder where they almost can't help it. Deception and pathological lying. Again, it is one of those things though where we all tell white lies from time to time, but in this instance, pathological lying. No, I don't pathologically lie and deceive people. Number 6, conning and or lack of sincerity. Conning is persuade someone to do or believe something by lying to them. No, I think that I would say definitely absent for this. Lack of sincerity. I'm definitely not. I don't think I feel the need to con anyone. Again, one of those things where you probably have moments in your life where you do want to persuade someone to do something. Again, that's not really my thing. I don't consider myself a good liar. Number 7, lack of remorse or guilt. Now this is the one I want to read because we've got lack of remorse or guilt. Number 8, lack of affect and emotional depth. And 9, callous and or lack of empathy. So these are why I wanted to read, just to get clarification about these, because remorse and empathy and guilt, these things kind of all tie in together a little bit. Psychopaths show a stunning lack of concern for the effects their actions have on others, no matter how devastating these might be. They may appear completely forthright about the matter, calmly stating that they have no sense of guilt, are not sorry for the ensuing pain, and that there is no reason now to be concerned. When asked if he had any regrets about stabbing a robbery victim who subsequently spent time in the hospital as a result of his wounds, one of our subjects replied, "Get real. He spends a few months in hospital and I rot here. If I wanted to kill him, I would have slit his throat. That's the kind of guy I am. I gave him a break." Their lack of remorse or guilt is associated with a remarkable ability to rationalize their behavior, to shrug off personal responsibility for actions that cause family, friends, and others to reel with shock and disappointment. They usually have handy excuses for their behavior and in some cases deny that it happened at all. And lack of empathy is described. Many of the characteristics displayed by psychopaths are closely associated with a profound lack of empathy and an inability to construct a mental and emotional facsimile of another person. They seem completely unable to get into the skin of others, except in a purely intellectual sense. They are completely indifferent to the rights and suffering of family and strangers alike. If they do maintain ties, it is only because they see family members as possessions. One of our subjects allowed her boyfriend to sexually a 5-year-old daughter because he wore me out. I wasn't ready for more sex that night. The woman found it hard to understand why the authorities took her child into care. What I'm kind of understanding from this is the remorse and guilt seems to be more associated with when you yourself have hurt someone, and whether you feel bad about that, and having like a lack of concern for the effects of your own actions on others, and the empathy is regardless of whether you're hurting someone or not, just not being able to see something from their own point of view. And callous, what does callous mean? Showing or having an insensitive and cruel disregard for others. Again, I think we're probably all guilty of being a little bit like that sometimes, especially, if you're being blamed for something and maybe feel a bit shameful, you might try to defend yourself, come across like this. But generally, I do think I'm a very empathetic person. So I'll say definitely absent for that one. Lack of remorse or guilt when I hurt someone. I'm trying to think the last time I actually hurt someone. I'm very tempted just to put definitely absent, but I'm trying to think. No, I think if I knowingly hurt someone that I love, I will feel guilty about that. Even in situations with strangers. Not that I get into altercations with people, but occasionally something might happen. And even if I think I'm in the right and I defend myself, if I handle myself in a way where I might feel a bit too defensive, later on I feel guilty and I feel bad that I let something get to me. And if I didn't treat someone as well as I would normally like to, even if I thought I was in the right, I really don't like that. So I'll also put definitely absent for that. Lack of affect and emotional depth. I do feel like I'm an emotionally deep person, so I'll put absent for that, but I will just read what Robert Hare describes that as. For shallow emotions, psychopaths seem to suffer a kind of emotional poverty that limits the range and depth of their feelings. At times they appear to be cold and unemotional, while nevertheless being prone to dramatic, shallow, and short-lived displays of feeling. Careful observers are left with the impression they are play-acting and little is going on below the surface. A psychopath in our research said that he didn't really understand what others meant by fear. When I rob a bank, he said, I notice that the teller shakes. One barfed all over the money. She must have been pretty messed up inside, but I don't know why. If someone pointed a gun at me, I guess I'd be afraid, but I wouldn't throw up. When asked if he'd ever felt his heart pound or his stomach churn, he replied, "Of course, I'm not a robot. I really get pumped up when I have sex or when I get into a fight." I've had some friends describe me as being aloof at times, which I think is the same as being cold and unemotional, but generally, even in those moments, there can be a lot going on underneath the surface. I might be like freaking out inside, which seems to be the opposite of what they're saying here, where little is going on below the surface. So yeah, I think I'm right to put definitely absent for that one. Number 10 is a parasitic lifestyle. I believe that means someone who's mooching, parasitic, freeloading, blood-sucking, smudging. I've had a friend who was like that, and I definitely don't consider myself that way. It takes a lot for me to ask someone for money or help or anything, except my parents. That's called being a millennial, so I say definitely absent for that one. Number 11, short-tempered, poor behavioral controls. I do believe this one also has a little blurb about it. Poor behavior controls. Besides being impulsive, psychopaths are highly reactive to perceived insults or slights. Most of us have powerful inhibitory controls over our behavior. Even if we would like to respond aggressively, we are usually able to keep the lid on. In psychopaths, these inhibitory controls are weak, and the slightest provocation is sufficient to overcome them. As a result, psychopaths are short-tempered or hot-headed and tend to respond to frustration, failure, discipline, and criticism with sudden violence, threats, or verbal abuse. But their outbursts, extreme as they may be, are often short-lived, and they quickly act as if nothing out of the ordinary has happened. For example, an inmate in line for dinner was accidentally bumped by another inmate whom he proceeded to beat senseless. The attacker then stepped back into line as if nothing had happened. Despite the fact that he faced solitary confinement as punishment for the infraction, his only comment when asked to explain himself was, "I was pissed off. He stepped into my space. I did what I had to do." Although psychopaths have a hair trigger, their aggressive displays are cold. They lack the intense arousal experienced when other individuals lose their temper. Yeah, look, I think that I do have good control over my behavior. Like I was saying before, when there's certain interactions I have where I might be defensive, I definitely feel like I can control myself, even if I am feeling a little bit sassy that day. But I have to admit, sometimes I feel like I don't have control over my behavior. I just really don't think it's to the extent of what Robert Hare's sort of getting at here. You have to be fairly aggressive. I kind of want to put possibly present there, but I might just put it there. Next in the questions is number 12, promiscuous sexual relations. And that's pretty self-explanatory. I really do think I can honestly answer that as definitely absent. I just don't think I've ever really been like that. Like I've been young and I'm not judging anyone for doing that, as long as you be safe. But I think most people that know me would agree with that. Number 13, early behavior problems. Reads, most psychopaths begin to exhibit serious behavioral problems at an early age. These might include persistent lying, cheating, theft, arson, truancy, substance abuse, vandalism, and/or precocious sexuality. Because many children exhibit some of these behaviors at one time or another, especially children raised in violent neighborhoods or in disrupted or abusive families, it is important to emphasize that the psychopath's history of such behaviors is more extensive and serious than most, even when compared with that of siblings and friends raised in similar settings. That's a good note right there. I did have anxiety and things like that, but I don't think it came out in any problems like he's describing, especially extensive and serious problems. So we'll put definitely absent for that one. Lots of Maggies in the background. Must be a certain time of the day. Number 14, lack of realistic long-term plans. Let me just think about this. I think I have always been just a bit going with the flow kind of a person, and I really don't think, especially when I was younger, that I really planned for my future. And if I did, I always had this idea that everything would just work out and it'll be fine, which isn't really what I would describe as realistic, even if it is beneficial to believe things like that. We'll just leave that one on definitely present. Just outing myself here. I seem so irresponsible. Number 15, impulsivity. So, psychopaths are unlikely to spend much time weighing the pros and cons of a course of action or considering the possible consequences. I did it because I felt like it, is a common response. These impulsive acts often result from an aim that plays a central role in most of the psychopath's behavior to achieve immediate satisfaction, pleasure, or relief. So family members, relatives, and employers and co-workers typically find themselves standing around asking themselves what happened. Jobs are quit, relationships broken off, plans changed, houses ransacked, people hurt, often for what appears as little more than a whim. As the husband of a psychopath I studied put it, she got up and left the table, and that was the last I saw of her for 2 months. I can be impulsive at times. I just bought a new camera the other day, but I did think about it. It is one of those things where I could put possibly present, but I just feel like I overthink things sometimes. Even when I do something and it might appear impulsive, I might have been sitting there thinking about it for 60 seconds and then decided to do it. It's not like I just see something and then I do it without thinking. So I guess I put definitely absent. 16, irresponsible behavior as a parent. Definitely absent. I don't have children. 17, frequent marital relationships. That one I can say definitely absent as well. That's good. Number 18, juvenile delinquency. It says early behavior problems and juvenile delinquency. The habitual committing of criminal acts or offenses by a young person. So that would seem like it's more crime related, which I can say I never got arrested for anything as a kid. You know, when I was younger though, I must have been about 3 years old, and my mum and I went out and we went to this jewelry store, and my mum was talking to the shopkeeper, and I had a doll with me, and I must have seen a piece of jewelry that I really liked, and so I just opened the glass container for one of these necklaces, and I took it out and I put it on my doll, and we just walked out of the store. And it wasn't until we got home that my mum noticed it, and she asked me, like, where did you get that? Even though I don't think I knew what I was doing as a kid, it was like I still knew right from wrong. I could tell my mum's demeanor that I had done something wrong, you know? So I think I was like, I found it, so I stole and I lied about it. And then my mum figured it out, and she went back to the jewelry store and she returned the necklace. So it was okay. And I still remember that. But again, like, I wasn't doing this stuff for fun. So we'll just say definitely absent. 19 is poor probation or parole risk. I guess I've never been to jail, so. 20, failure to accept responsibility for own actions. Obligations and commitments mean nothing to psychopaths. Their good intentions, "I'll never cheat on you again," are promises written on the wind. Horrendous credit histories, for example, reveal the lightly taken debt, the loan shrugged off, the empty pledge to contribute to a child's support. Their performance on the job is erratic, with frequent absences, misuse of company resources, violations of company policy, and general untrustworthiness. They do not honor formal or implied commitments to people, organizations, or principles. I am trying to think hard though, if I do something and then I'm like, just pretend I didn't do that. Does that mean that you have to own up for something if something happens and you don't own up? Is that failure? to accept responsibility, because internally you might be accepting responsibility and you might feel bad about it. And I definitely always keep my obligations and commitments, and especially in work, I'm very good like that. Look, I don't think that I am like that, so I'll put absent for that one. 21 is many types of offense. Kind of think they mean crimes, maybe, which I can say definitely absent. 22, drug or alcohol abuse, not direct cause of antisocial behavior. Psychopaths see the rules and expectations of society as inconvenient and unreasonable impediments to their own behavioral expression. They make their own rules both as children and as adults. Many of the antisocial acts of psychopaths lead to criminal charges and convictions. Even within the criminal population, psychopaths stand out largely because the antisocial and illegal activities of psychopaths are more varied and frequent than are those of other criminals. Psychopaths tend to have no particular affinity or specialty for one particular type of crime, but tend to try everything. But not all psychopaths end up in jail. Many of the things they do escape detection or prosecution, or are on the shady side of the law. For them, antisocial behavior may consist of phony stock promotions, questionable business practices, spouse or child abuse, and so forth. Many others do things that, though not necessarily illegal, are nevertheless unethical, immoral, or harmful to others, philandering or cheating on a spouse, to name a few. Well, I don't have antisocial behavior, but just for shits and giggles, maybe we'll just put possibly present for that one. So that's the end of my answers. I kind of hope you guys take this test with me, although you're probably just trying to sleep right now, so fair enough. So shall we score my answers and see? We can already tell that I'm not a psychopath. Your score was 7 out of a possible 44. And look, if you're concerned about your score, you can chat with a licensed therapist. So, a score of 30 or greater corresponds to a diagnosis of psychopathy. So I think I'm pretty much in the clear. To put scores into context, an individual with no criminal background would generally score at or around 5. Yeah. And many non-psychopathic criminals score around the 22 range. So I am nowhere near the 22 range, much more like the general population. Nothing to worry about here, guys. So did you guess that I wasn't a psychopath? I hope so. I hope I don't come across that way. But now you know. And now you know a little bit more about me. Feel free to leave your result unless you score kind of high and you don't want to out yourself. Maybe you want to keep that to yourself. And just a quick note, guys, I'm sorry this video took so long to come out. I think it was about 4 months ago now that I released the first video. I did not intend for it to take this long, but hoping to get a little more into this now, again, for the new year. So thanks for tuning in. I hope that you've enjoyed this 2-part series about psychopaths, and we'll see you in the next video.